So, on the evening of June 26, 1999, a married couple from Bartlesville, Michael J. Hicks, age 40, and his wife, Merrie Lynn Hicks, age 39, were driving back from Tulsa to Bartlesville after a day of shopping and dining in Tulsa, which anyone from the area can tell you is a very common thing to do. And most of the time, the couples make it home without incident. Unfortunately, on this particular trip, on the drive back, Michael Hicks was driving and his wife was asleep as a passenger. Somehow he fell asleep at the wheel about 6 miles from Bartlesville, and his car drifted off the side of the road and went over off a cliff into the Caney River bridge. He was able to get out of the car, but unfortunately his wife died as a result of the accident, him running off the road. Now, if you find this account a little suspicious, that someone driving back from Tulsa to Bartlesville would just happen to fall asleep and drive off the road right at that point, you wouldn't be the only one. These crosses mark the spot along the road where the car went off the bridge. I'll talk a little bit more about the crosses later, this apparent memorial. Stretch of highway leading up to the Caney River Bridge, and it's basically the same as it was back when the incident happened on June 26, 1999. This ranch property is still to the right. The terrain looks the same. There was an area with a fence and then a building between the guardrail and the cliff, like you see in the footage here coming up. And this is where Mr. Hicks claimed he fell asleep and drifted off the road. Didn't act like it publicly. The investigating officers and the Washington County prosecutor, this occurred in Washington County, Oklahoma, were suspicious of Mr. Hicks's account of what happened, that this was a tragic accident due to him falling asleep at the wheel. They were suspicious of his story from the beginning. And within 6 months, in December of 1999, they would issue a warrant for his arrest. A warrant was issued for his arrest, and he was charged with first-degree murder in connection with his wife's death. The prosecution would allege that this was a murder staged to look like an accident. Now, before we get into the circumstantial case that the prosecutor built against Mr. Hicks, I want to show you this footage of what the drive is like up to this bridge. And just look at some of the stuff you're passing by along this drive, this ranch property. There's a building between the guardrail and the bridge itself. You know, there's all these changes in the terrain, from drives into the ranch property to, concrete from the driveway to changes in the slope on the grass. And, Mr. Hicks said he was driving he had the cruise control on at 72 miles per hour. And yet, somehow he drifts to the right in not too jerky of a motion, I guess, because he gets it right between the fence and the guardrail. And apparently the terrain didn't, shake the car up so much, the change in the terrain, that, he just goes straight off this cliff. Now, that alone ought to be a little suspect. And like I said before, the terrain is basically the same as it was way back when. Not sure if the guardrail leading up to the bridge is a little extended, but even if the guardrail was shorter back then, you still have all these changes in the terrain that could have thrown a car going off the road at a high speed in any number of directions, turned it over, yet, he goes off the cliff. He manages to get out, but his wife perishes as a result of the accident. Now let's get into the circumstantial evidence case that the authorities built against Michael J. Hicks. Among the circumstantial evidence and incriminating evidence, police at the scene reported that he didn't seem that muddy or wet for someone who went through that ordeal, going off into this river, and then supposedly he tried to go back to the car after he escaped to get his wife, but there was nothing he could do. But yeah, apparently they didn't think he was very muddy or wet for having been through what he said he went through. He allegedly made statements expressing concern that the officers note or state that his wife was wearing her seatbelt at the time because he believed that would affect the life insurance payout. And it turned out, supposedly, he reportedly carried 3 different life insurance policies on her. And he claimed he had the cruise control set at 72 miles per hour. That's what he said, 72 miles per hour. It's a 70 mile per hour speed limit. Wouldn't be unusual for somebody to set the cruise a mile or 2 over. Yet, the experts they brought in who estimated that the vehicle had been traveling much, much slower at the time it went off the cliff. One investigator estimated about 16 miles per hour. I don't know why I couldn't just round down to 15, but whatever. And supposedly, he falls asleep at the wheel, but he didn't really have any health condition or anything that would have affected that. Yet his wife was reportedly taking a variety of prescription medications for some health issues she was having. She had previously worked as a gymnastics instructor and had recently quit her job due to her health. Yet, according to the autopsy, one of the medications she was prescribed was 9 times the prescription level. So, extremely elevated medications. So, the theory is he sedated her and, she was asleep, sedated in the car. And, of course, the cause of death was drowning after the car went in the water. And, Oh, and, of course, wouldn't want to forget to mention this. Not terribly uncommon among men accused of doing this sort of thing. It turned out he had a girlfriend he'd been carrying on a relationship with in another state. And after hearing about this, she contacted the police and agreed to tape some phone conversations with him. And even though he never explicitly confessed to killing her, these conversations were incriminating and did not help the defense one bit. Also, combine that all with it's kind of suspicious that you would happen to fall asleep at the wheel right there, 6 miles from town, and go off the road right there. I mean, you see what the terrain looks like. That would be some bad timing, to say the least. And I wasn't really able to find an article about this incident or the trial or anything that indicated exactly when it supposedly happened, except it was reportedly after 6 p.m., which that time of year, it would be light up until after 9. Yet nobody saw Mr. Hicks drive off the road like he said he did. No witnesses have ever come forward indicating they saw him drive off the road like he said he did. Went to trial in August of 2000, and he was found guilty of murder in the first degree. The jury did not believe his story that this was a tragic accident and unintentional. They believed the prosecution's theory that it was a murder staged to look like an accident. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole, and all of his appeals have failed, and he is currently incarcerated in the state of Oklahoma. Now, back to the roadside memorial at the scene of the crime. I don't remember ever seeing these crosses set up here before the murder incident on June 26, 1999, so I'm assuming they were set up sometimes afterwards. I'm guessing it was a family member, and I don't know the meaning of having the two crosses like that, if it's related to, what happened. Maybe it's some family member who wants to believe Michael Hicks's side of the story, wants to believe in his innocence, and maybe that's why they got two crosses. I don't know. But unfortunately, even if he has family that want to believe in his innocence, the evidence is definitely stacked against him, and he looks guilty. And like I said, even with all of that, even without all of that circumstantial evidence against him, I find it hard to believe that someone would drift off the road at 72 miles per hour like that, right at that spot, that, their car would just drive off the road like that with all those changes in the terrain. It's not very credible to me. But this is the story of the murder staged to look like an accident at the Caney River Bridge in 1999. And thought it was a video worth doing because so many years have gone by. A lot of people probably don't remember this as well as they used to. So, thank you for watching.